So as we continue to look at these original documents, one of the most important that we'll see is the Gettysburg Address. This was made by Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War. It's also one of the shortest, so it should be quite easy for you to get to grips with it. If it is quoted or used in the GED exam, they could use all of it because it's only a few hundred words. Let's have a look together. Today we're going to look at the Gettysburg Address. It's another speech by Abraham Lincoln. It was November 19, 1863. So you should know that it's during the Civil War. And if you know it's during the Civil War, you should be thinking that in a war, a leader needs to inspire his people. He needs to motivate his people. Okay. As President Abraham Lincoln had been invited to speak at the dedication of the new cemetery at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, which would be the final resting place for soldiers who had died in the bloodiest battle of the Civil War. So you know cemetery is where you bury the dead bodies. And they made this new cemetery because so many people had died in the Battle of Gettysburg. When so many people die, you need a new cemetery. You need a place where you can bury them. Before he spoke, keynote speaker Edward Everett provided the crowd with a moving but lengthy speech on the historical causes and the moral consequences of the war. So the main speaker had said this long speech, very emotional, very powerful, but very long. You know that people don't like to listen to very long speeches. Yeah. You don't like to listen to very long speeches. Other people don't like to listen to very long speeches. When Lincoln came on, he gave this speech, and this is the whole of the speech. Only 272 words. So it's an extremely short speech, but it showed the importance of why all men are equal for the past, the present, and the future. And this has been a very famous speech that has been studied in schools in America pretty much ever since. It's one of the most famous speeches. It comes up quite a lot in American social studies. So I think we should start by reading it. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. 77 is 87. A score means 20. So 40 is 4 times 20 plus 7. So 87 years ago. They're talking about the time when America was born. Our fathers means the founding fathers. George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson. Brought forth on this continent, the continent meaning America, a new nation. Well, America was a new country. Before, it had been a colony of Britain, but they made a new country when they separated from Britain. Conceived in liberty. Conceive means basically made. Conceive is a verb that you use when you're making a baby. So a man and a wife, they have sex, and the sperm and the egg meet. A baby is conceived. The baby is begun. It is made. So it is made in liberty, the idea of freedom. So America was a country that was made with the idea of freedom. Dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. It was made in freedom, and it was given to the idea that all men are equal. There shouldn't be a king, for example, that is more powerful than the other people. All the people in the country will be equal people. So it's about freedom and equality. Now we are engaged in a great civil war. We're fighting a war. Testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. So he says that the Civil War is about testing whether the nation can survive. If a nation that is made on liberty, freedom, and equality, can a nation based on the idea of freedom and equality survive or not? We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that nation might live. So he's saying, we gathered together on this battlefield where many people fought, and it's their final resting place. That means where the bodies will be buried. And they gave their lives for the nation to survive. So he's saying, it's basically an encouragement. He's saying, this is not just about slavery. It's not just about North versus South. This is testing, can our nation survive? So he's trying to really encourage people, to not give up, to fight, not for themselves, but to fight for the good of the whole country. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. It is right that we should gather and pay respect, give honor to the men that lost their life so that the nation would survive. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. Dedicate means give for something. Consecrate is a biblical word. It means make holy. Hallow, again, is holy. So he's saying we cannot make this ground holy. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. He's saying it's not the action of the president, it's not the action of the meeting that makes that place special. It was the bravery of the men fighting, those that survived and those that died, that made the place special. The world will little know nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. He's saying our speech might be forgotten very quickly, but the sacrifice, the men giving their lives, will not be forgotten. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It says, for those that survive, for those that are still living, they have a duty to give themselves to the work, to the war, to win the war, to honor the sacrifice that those that died made. So that's really that encouragement to the whole country to not give up, to fight, to honor the memory of those that already died fighting for the country. It is rather for us here to be dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. For us that are remaining, we have to honor those that died with increased devotion, with increased effort to what they were fighting for. And they gave the last full measure. That means they gave everything that they had to protect the nation. They gave their life to protect the nation. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain. They didn't waste their life. By fighting for the country, they did not waste their life. That this nation, this country under God, shall have a new birth of freedom. That freedom will come again. That when the battle is finished between those that are rebelling, the Confederacy and the Union, when that is over, there will be freedom again for everybody. And that the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. The government that is chosen from the people in the country, that is chosen by the election of the people in the country, the government that work for the good of the people in the country, shall not die, shall not go from the earth. Okay? So it's a very powerful speech that reminds people that they're fighting for the idea of freedom and equality that America was founded on, that those that gave their life gave the full sacrifice, and those that are left have a duty to complete the fight, to win the fight, and to prove that the government of the people can survive. Nathia? Understand? Good. If you understand that, that's good. We're going to look at the two exercises that you were given. And we're going to do it in reverse order. So the second one that I gave you was trying to rephrase what parts of this mean. And it was multiple choice. So I think if we look at that one first, that will help you to understand the meaning of the text. And then we'll look at the questions to go a little bit deeper. But we're going to start with the first one, which was about the meaning of the different words. And some of the words are difficult, of course. And remember, this is 150 years old. So the language that they used 150 years ago is not quite the same as the language that people use today. So question 1 said, 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation. What does this mean? Well, I've told you that score is 20, so 80. 7 means 87. So the correct answer for number 1 is B. This sentence means that 87 years ago, some people made a new country that brought them together. Conceived in liberty. Now, liberty is obviously the idea of free or freedom, but it doesn't mean taken from a free country. Conceive, I've already told you, is like a baby being born when the sperm and the egg get together and they make a new baby inside the woman's womb. This is conceiving, conception. So it means born. The country was born in a... No, it doesn't mean born in a free country. Sorry, it means based on the idea of freedom. The answer is A. It was based on the idea of freedom. They weren't in the free country, they made a free country. Question 3, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now, it's not everybody gets the same. They're not saying that equality means everybody gets the same. That's communism. Communism is the idea that everybody has exactly equal amount. All the work is done as a country and then shared out by the government equally to everybody. That's communism, not democracy. But this is the idea that all people are equal, so all people are the same. The correct answer is B. So now we are engaged in a great civil war. We're not debating it, we're fighting it. Engaged here is actually doing it. We're not planning the war, they are already fighting the war. So the correct answer for number 4 is A. Now we are fighting a war between the states, between the northern states and the southern states, between the Union and the Confederacy. Testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. Now, it's the idea that the nation is based on equality and freedom. So our American nation or any other nation that is also based on equality and freedom can survive. So the correct answer is B. They're trying to see if we, America, or any country who believes in these ideas of equality and freedom can continue to exist, can endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. They're not about to start fighting, the battle is already finished. They're making the cemetery, so it's not answer C. People are coming to meet us here doesn't really get the idea of the battlefield. No, we are standing on an important battlefield of that war. The answer is B. The fight has already finished in Gettysburg. It is one of the deadliest that had happened in the Civil War, and they are meeting together in the place where the fighting had been. 7. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that nation might live. Now, answer B is talking about the soldiers resting. It doesn't quite, that's not quite the idea. If you ever see, maybe on movies or places, it says R.I.P. What does R.I.P. mean?
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. People often don't like to say dead. So they like to use other words that make it nicer to hear. They often saying something directly is a little bit hurtful. So they use the idea of resting. But they don't really mean taking a break, they mean they're dead. So the answer is A. They came here to say that this piece of field is holy because it is the final resting place for those that died. Question 8. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men living and dead who struggled here have consecrated it far above the poor power to add or detract. Now, it's not talking about refusing to honor people. America always honors the people that died fighting for the country. If you look in America, the flag is very much respected because it represents the army, the people that died fighting for the country. It's not talking about building there. It's saying, but really, we cannot make this place holy because the men who died already made that place holy. So the answer is A. 9. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. The answer is B. People won't remember this ceremony, they won't remember the speeches, but they will remember the sacrifice, what the men did who died and fought here. 10. It is for us the living rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. Who said A? Who said B? The answer is B. It's for us who are still alive to promise to continue the fight, to continue fighting for the idea that those people that died fought for. 11. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honoured dead we take in increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. Now, who said A? Who said B? Now, it's not about making the place nice. It's about continuing the ideas that they have been fighting for. So the correct answer is B. We promise that we will continue the work for the great job that they died for. 12. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain. Who said A? B? C? The answer is A. We promise that the men who died here died for a good reason. They did not die in vain. They did not die needlessly. They died protecting the country, and we will also try to protect the country. That this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom. Who said A? Who said B? Who said C? Now C is wrong. It's not talking about religious country. And A is wrong. It's not a new form of government. They want to continue the form of government. Abraham Lincoln is not saying the Republican, the representative government is wrong. He's saying that the representative government is the government of the people, and we will continue to have that government of the people. So the correct answer is B. And the last question, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Who said A? Now, it says not perish from the earth. It means it shall not be gone. It doesn't mean spread. Who said B? It doesn't mean it cannot exist. He believes it can exist. Who said C? Yeah, C is correct. The idea of people being involved in government will continue. It will not be destroyed. So, looking at the 9 comprehension questions on the Gettysburg Address. Number 1, who wrote the Gettysburg Address and why? This was Abraham Lincoln. He wrote it because he was giving a speech after a great battle in the Civil War. He wanted to honor the memory of the dead, and he wanted to encourage people not to give up. He wanted to encourage them to keep going until the end, until they were victorious over the southern states, over the Confederacy. What is the main message of the address? Question 2. The main idea is that America was a country based on the ideals of freedom and equality, and that the war was to protect America, and that the Northerners, the Unionists, needed to keep going to prove that this form of country, a country based on equality, could survive. Question 3. How does Lincoln describe the United States? He describes it as a nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the ideal that all men are created equal. It's in the first paragraph. Question 4. Why does Lincoln refer to the Founding Fathers? Because he's linking the Civil War to the birth of the nation. He's trying to inspire and encourage people to keep fighting and not give up. He's saying that people are not just fighting a small war over a disagreement over slavery or something like that. He's saying they're fighting to prove that a country based on equality and ruled by the people is viable, that it can succeed. And people really revered the Founding Fathers like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams. So again, he's trying to inspire and encourage people not to give up. Question 5. What does the speech say the soldiers are fighting for? It's in the second paragraph. They are fighting to prove that a nation born on the idea of freedom and equality can survive. What does Lincoln believe the purpose of the war to be? Again, it's proving that the nation can survive, that they can prove to the whole world that a nation that believes in equality can survive, compared to other nations like Britain, which had a monarchy where some people were rich, some people were poor, where there was a lot of inequality. He wants to prove that a different way, that a country where people are equal, can also survive. Question 7. What lesson does Lincoln say we can learn from this battle? He says, look at the sacrifice of the soldiers. Look how much they gave to protect the country. Learn from them, be more dedicated, and work harder to win the battle, to win the Civil War. What is Lincoln referring to when he says, of the people, by the people, for the people? Well, he's literally saying the government is made up of people that live in that country, of the people. That the government is chosen by the people that live in the country in the election, by the people. And the government is working for the benefit of everybody in the country, which is for the people. And in some ways, I think Lincoln here is referring to the preamble of the Constitution. In the preamble to the Constitution, it said, "We, the people of the United States, in order to make a more perfect government, do ordain and establish the Constitution of America." The preamble to the Constitution is saying that the Constitution, that the law of the country, is being made by the people of the country. That the law of the country is to protect all people in the country. That the government will be working for the people. So I think he's referring back to that preamble of the Constitution. And number 9, what does Lincoln mean by a new birth of freedom? Whose freedom is he talking about? He's talking about the freedom of the people. And he's linking it to the Declaration of Independence. When in the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." In the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson was saying that God has given everybody the right to be free. But Lincoln would argue that when the southern states separated from the Union, when the Confederacy seceded from the Union, that they start to damage the freedom of the people to live in the country that was founded for them. And so he's saying that there will be a new birth of freedom, a new birth meaning when the war is over, everybody will be free again. Now, you might want to argue that he's also talking about freedom for the black people. But remember, the Emancipation Proclamation in January 1863 had only set free the people in the southern states, not the border states. So it's quite unlikely that Lincoln was actually talking about black people here. He wouldn't want to upset the slave owners in those 4 border states of Missouri, Kentucky, Delaware, etc. And he wouldn't want to frighten them away. So he's probably just talking about the whole country will be united again, and then the whole country will get their freedom again. Freedom from war and freedom from oppression. So, just to summarize, the Gettysburg Address is Lincoln's speech after a great battle when many people had died. He wants to encourage people not to give up, and so he talks about the Civil War purpose as being to protect the nation that was made on the idea of freedom and equality. And he says, look at your brothers, look at these people that already died. They gave everything they had for the country. Now you need to do the same. You need to dedicate yourselves to the victory.